But for now, we will get into our panel discussion. So the panel discussion is going to be talking about, potential solutions to de-risk technology and therefore mobilize more investment into InfraTech. And a lot of the things that our panel members are going to be talking about are very much aligned with, some of the challenges and opportunities that Perna and Paul had spoken about just now. So I would like to introduce you to our four panelists. We have Reinaldo Fioravanti, a lead specialist in the infrastructure department at the Inter-American Development Bank. We have Ralf Ott, who is the head of policy and regulation at Hydrogenious Technologies. Hydrogenious is a pioneer in storing and transporting hydrogen in order to accelerate the hydrogen economy. Serdar Tufekci, who is the vice president and head of partnerships at ENGIE North America. Serdar is the founder of the Energy Innovation Center that is currently under construction at Ohio State, and he also heads the partnership with Ohio State as well as several other universities around the country. Alexandra Bolton has been the executive director at the Center for Digital Built Britain since 2017. And her aim is to advance the digital transformation of the built environment through their various programs, including the National Digital Twin and the Construction Innovation Hub. So welcome to all four of you, and looking forward to the discussion, which we will kick off with Reinaldo. So Reinaldo, getting a high-level government commitment to financing InfraTech is a huge milestone in this space. And you have a great example in Brazil, where you're working with the Ministry of Finance to co-develop a national InfraTech strategy, which could unlock a significant pool of funding for InfraTech projects. Can you tell us more about this initiative and the impact that this could have on InfraTech and the climate transition?
Thank you, Monica. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to participate. Congratulations for the GIH for leading the InfraTech agenda. This is very important for the infrastructure sector. So at IDB, InfraTech contributes to some key pillars of our strategy, including the climate transition and digital transformation. And in that sense, as a development bank, working with governments, we're approaching InfraTech on what I say a bottom-up and a top-down approach on two fronts. And I want to briefly explain that before I go to your question. First, the bottom-up approach recognizes that technology brings innovation, innovation brings risks, and governments are risk-averse. So any effort to mitigate risks, prove concepts, and convince the stakeholders is critical to accelerate this agenda. Just like the other panelists were discussing. Second, the top-down approach, we recognize that we need to deal with InfraTech on the public policy level with bold and comprehensive actions, understanding the stakeholders, the costs and benefits. The issue of having a taxonomy like Paul mentioned is very important. And finally, providing or leveraging the resources for its implementation. So having said that, and going to your question, I want to refer to the top-down approach that the Brazilian government is doing, which is, in my opinion, is a very good example of that. So Brazilian government took the initiative recently of launching a InfraTech strategy, which is housed at the Ministry of Economy and Finance, which is very welcome in my opinion, because it elevates the dialogue. And the ministry decided to base the strategy on the GIH policy toolkit, emphasize dimensions like regulations, institutional capacity, and PPPs and concessions, and also providing guidelines for subnational entities. Just to give some examples of the initiative that the strategy is guiding right now, as we speak, includes a regulation framework for 5G implementation at the subnational level, or tax exemptions for IoT communication. So these are key enablers for InfraTech. And what's the role of IDB as a development bank in this case? The team from IDB is working with the government, with Brazilian government, to support the design of the strategy, but also to create this ecosystem for the implementation that the panel and polls mentioned, which includes obviously financial mechanisms. And in this context, the bank recently approved a $1 billion loan for Brazil to finance digital transformation at the government level. We know that this is much broader than InfraTech, but what we are working on right now is to connect this effort, the strategy, the policy, and the financing and the loan. So governments at the supranational level have the funding to deploy InfraTech initiative, and this will enable us, or enable them, to connect the policy, the strategy, and the financial mechanism. So I think this is a very interesting case that we're gonna see how it's gonna play out in the following months. A final note on the climate transition perspective, Monica, and the good news is that IDB aligns its operation to the climate transition and the climate change agreements. So when we implement this financial mechanism, like this loan, it will necessarily drive research to those technologies that have a contribution to climate mitigation or adaptation. So I like this case. I'm very optimistic about this project, and we have a very clear vision from the government, and we hope we can mobilize considerable amount of resources, both public and private, and as we scale up solutions. And I think it's a very good example of integrating strategy, policy, and InfraTech projects.
Thank you, Reinaldo, for that. And yeah, I mean, the impact that a national strategy can have on InfraTech is huge, as you've just demonstrated there. And yeah, that is actually one of the items in the policy toolkit, which was actually a document developed by the World Bank, for the G20 back in 2020. So it's well worth a read, that's for sure. So we're now going to go over to Ralf. So shifting from national strategy to technology. So Ralf, hydrogen technology has a big role to play in the climate transition. Obviously, our data shows that embodied carbon contributes nearly 20% of emissions, and a large proportion of this is attributed to steel, for which renewable electricity can really only do so much. It's a very sort of fuel-intensive manufacturing process. Hydrogenious has recently raised 50 million euro to scale the technology, which is a great success story. So, about your journey, your technology, and how this demand for zero emissions energy sources has really helped you to attract that financing for your technology.
Thank you, Monica, and good evening, good morning, good afternoon. In Germany, it's afternoon to everybody. Thanks for letting me contribute to this very interesting discussion and panel. First of all, as we know, it is vital for the steel industry, but for the economy as a whole, or all the countries, it is important to have access to cheap energy. And this energy in the future, as you just said, has to become green and or no carbon in order to decarbonize the economy. And now we are seeing the trend towards renewable energy. And it has two advantages, because it has become the cheapest source of energy or electricity on a worldwide scale, and it helps to decarbonize the economy. But, and there comes hydrogen into the game, renewable energy has two disadvantages. First of all, the renewable resources are quite scarce and not evenly distributed over the world, and electricity is quite difficult to transport over long distances. So there comes hydrogen. As hydrogen is not seen as an energy itself, but an energy carrier, and this helps economies to get access to this cheap renewable energy. And of course, it's not just hydrogen which will play a big role in the future, but also other technologies. And now comes the downside of hydrogen. It is quite difficult to handle in its molecular form. And there comes LOHC or Hydrogenious, our company, to get into the game. It was founded 2013 and has now more than 130 employees. Mid-sized company nowadays. When I started 1.5 years ago, we were about 50. So quite a big success story in terms of growth. And we developed a liquid organic hydrogen carrier, LOHC, where you can store hydrogen and transport it like we know from the existing oil infrastructure. So I don't want to go into the technical details, but just let me explain a little bit more about it. We can make hydrogen handling very easy, as we are using the typical oil infrastructure, and it's a non-toxic fluid. So other than explosive hydrogen in its molecule form or ammonia, and it has still a rather high energy density. And how does it work? We have to build a storage plant where you store the hydrogen, you dock it, bind it to the oil, and then you can transport it via ship, truck trailer, or train to the release plant, which could be close to an industry like the steel industry, or for example, a harbor, which is connected to a pipeline system. So basically that's our technology, LOHC. We use benzyl toluol as a carrier. And now, what has become such a success story for us, or why? We try to approach the investors. We have key investors like AP Ventures, which is an organization of Anglo Platinum, which gave us very early seed capital. And we have at the other side also strategic investors like Royal Vopak, a Dutch company, the world's leading independent tank storage company. And they are really knowing how to handle energy carriers like oil, and providing the infrastructure for these energy carriers, and now know that they have to help to decarbonize the energy sector, and they are into the different types of transporting or storing energy. And furthermore, we received a lot of support from and funding from Germany and Europe and other countries. And in Europe, there's now the very big program called Important Projects of Common European Interest, and in terms of the hydrogen economy, for scaling up the technology. And as you said, we received 50 million euros of fresh capital, yes, and we received it from companies like Chevron, JERA, and Temasek. So very much from the Asia-Pacific region, where hydrogen is seen as a main pillar of the future energy, let's say energy mix, energy carriers, and they really are into this game of hydrogen, how you get access to cheap electricity or cheap energy in the end. And it's for us, it was a question to attract strategic investors on the one hand, and financial investors on the other side, with both sides having a certain risk appetite on the new innovative technology. And of course, they have knowledge about the future trends in terms of decarbonizing economies. And what are the main challenges for us? Well, first of all, we are a company into investing in infrastructure investments. Our infrastructure is already quite capital intensive. And furthermore, climate technology is quite capital intensive, and you have to scale it up in order to become competitive to conventional technologies. We have seen this with the power, solar power, for example, 10, 15 years ago. Now solar power is the cheapest energy source. Why? Because we have scaled it up on a worldwide scale, and now it's so cheap. And the same happens right now with the electric vehicles, where it started 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and now companies like Tesla have a huge success because they're competitive to the conventional cars. And this is quite a challenge for us, and also for the other companies like us. We have a new technology, innovative technology, and we think, and our investors think, that this will become a very important technology for the future. But still, you need a lot of money, you need a lot of investments in order to scale it up to become competitive.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ralf, for providing us with that perspective, and the strategic investors as being a big enabler for you as well in that successful journey. So continuing on with the flow of technology, we'll go to Alexandra. On the flip side of wanting to attract investment into InfraTech, InfraTech can also be used to attract investment into infrastructure. And I think Prerna sort of covered that as well, in her presentation. Along these lines, the UK industry and the built environment is very much committed to advancing the use of digital twins for infrastructure, specifically connecting this network of digital twins. So, can you, first of all, just tell us a little bit more about what a digital twin is, and why should infrastructure investors be interested in this?
Thanks, Monica, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody out there. So infrastructure itself creates lots of data right from the beginning of when you think about designing it. Before you pick up your mouse or your pen, you need to think about what sort of data is needed. But there's data in itself as how big is something, how long is something, how much did it cost, where did it come from? And throughout the lifetime of infrastructure, as it's being used, and even right at the end as it's dismantled and hopefully recycled, it creates data. And if you can have better data, you can make better decisions more quickly. And we know that to solve a lot of the issues of our day, we need to make some really good decisions. But also when you're investing, you need to make good decisions about what is the asset you're investing in, how will it perform in the future. And this is where digital twins come in. So a digital twin takes a physical thing, and that can be an asset, a road, a house, a power network, but it can also be processes and systems. And it takes the data that they create, puts it into a cyber model, if you like, where the data, the model, the visualizations, and the simulations can run. And to be a true digital twin, not only do you have that modeling simulation piece, you have an intervention that goes back from that cyber world into the physical world. So let me give you an example. Very simply, if you have a heating system in your house, it's looking at the temperatures in your various rooms, and it might turn the boiler on or off depending on whether your room is too hot or too cold. That's a very, very simple digital twin. They don't have to be super complex. They don't have to have a visualization. They need to take data, they need to do some form of modeling or simulation, and they need to put an intervention back into the real world. And the intervention could be as simple as calling the road team out to fill a pothole in the road because a car's detected that there is a hot pothole. Digital twins allow us to deliver better value by making these better decisions more quickly, but they need also to be driven by values. They need to have a purpose. Why are you doing it? They need to be trustworthy, and they need to function. They have to work. This isn't just about economic outcomes. It's also about the social and environmental outcomes that come from us using our data to make these better decisions more quickly. However, the value of digital twins really kicks in when you start to interconnect them. And I was really pleased to hear Danny talk about collaboration, because it is about collaboration. If we can share our data amongst our individual assets, we can make even better decisions about that whole system of systems. I think Paul referred to it as an ecosystem. I'm an engineer, and I would call it a system of systems. So let me give you an example. If you have a rail system, you can optimize that rail system for the best performance for rail. You're looking at your train carriages, your tracks, your signaling. But the rail system sits within the transport system. So we need to optimize that as well against the road system, the aviation system, and any other forms of transport that we have. Yet we know that the transport system is heavily reliant on the energy system. So let's link those systems together, whether we're talking about electric cars or trains, or whether we're talking about hydrocarbons. It's the energy system, which again is linked to the water system. So you can see how you can build up these systems that need to be talking to each other, that need to be connected. So this is what we call a connected ecosystem of digital twins. It allows us to make those holistic decisions better and more quickly. So what does that mean for investors in InfraTech? Well, of course, they can invest in digital twin technology as a technology innovation, and there plenty are doing so, and it has a good ROI. But it also allows you to invest in your infrastructure itself in a more focused way and with more certainty. So if you have better data, you also have a better understanding of your asset. of how it fits into its ecosystem, of how it will perform over time, of what tweaks you can make for it to perform better. And that increased certainty and the decreased risk of actually knowing what's happening in your asset, knowing what will happen in your asset and what has happened in your asset, makes investment far less risky. But we also need to be looking at those outcomes, and the ESG outcomes in particular. If you know what's happening in your asset and you know how it's fitting within its ecosystem, you can choose to make the decisions not only to optimize financial gain, economic outcomes, but also those environmental outcomes. If we can't model, if we don't have the data about what's happening in our infrastructure, we can't make those decisions that will help with the climate transformation. But it's not just about the certainty and risk, it's also about the profitability of that asset itself, because you can look at your data, look at those decisions you need to make, and make decisions on the profitability of that asset. You can make it run much more efficiently, whether you're talking about energy and heating systems, or whether you're talking about managing the time you choose to maintain your lift shafts for a time when there are no people in the office or that building. And it's broader than that. The profitability also links with the surrounding areas. So if you're running a shopping mall, for example, and the transport system changes, you will be able to model how does that affect your shopping mall? How do you adapt your shopping malls to take advantage of those changes in the transport system? Maybe it's a bus timetable or a train timetable. So it's not about investing in the tech itself. It's also about demanding that that tech is used in the infrastructure in which you're investing. And that will allow you to make better decisions, to increase the certainty you have of the use and the life cycle of your infrastructure, to decrease the risk and increase the profitability. And to be clear, it's not only about creating better financial outcomes, it's also about creating better outcomes for people and the planet. So I'm taking the view that InfraTech is two ways. It's about investing in the tech in itself as an investment, but it's also about using that tech to allow your investment in the infrastructure to be more profitable and create better outcomes for people and the planet. Thanks, Monica.
That's great. Thanks, Alexandra. And you know that database decision making is a big topic for us here at the Hub as well. You know, as a way of really being able to give that sort of greater confidence in the infrastructure and its performance. So, so great to hear about that potential for digital twins, and I guess you know other sort of similar technologies as well. So Serdar, you know, I've left you for last, but you know, not because you know, well, last is sometimes always best. But you know, you have a very interesting model that you've adopted in the university sector, you know, which is really looking about some of those emissions associated with energy in buildings. Can you take us through your concession type approach for financing InfraTech in the university sector? And also, can you give us an overview of the kind of impact that you've seen to date and that this could have in the future?
I'm very happy to do that, Monica. Thank you for that. Perhaps I'll start with highlighting some of the differences between a conventional energy sales P3 versus a concession agreement. Well, for one thing, it's typically 50 years long, 50. That gives us a long horizon and enables us to plan strategically. And the most important part of it is, though, we do not sell energy to the customer. Because I think that's the biggest differentiator. So overall, I can actually summarize the contract in 5 bullets. We provide operations and maintenance services for the energy infrastructure on the campus, subject to reliability and efficiency KPIs. We provide capital improvement projects with design, financing, and construction services. We have a guaranteed energy use intensity clause. We shall reduce the total energy used on a campus over a 10-year period by X%, depending on the campus. We provide procurement advice for natural gas and electricity. And finally, there's academic collaboration, that's scholarships, internships, and collaborative research. So of those 5, the 2 that are most relevant to today's webinar are the capital improvements and the energy use intensity reduction. So the contract does not say what capital improvements we're going to do. It does not say what energy efficiency projects we're going to execute. It literally says, for example, at Ohio State, we shall reduce total energy consumed on campus per square meter per year by at least 25% within 10 years, under a $250 million budget cap. So that's the sort of framework. It's up to us to come up with ideas, whether it's fuel exchange, whether it's steam to heating hot water conversion, installation of heat recovery chillers, whether it's implementing a digital network to provide efficiency of data analysis and control, hydrogen, solar, you name it. And typically, our solutions are all of the above. So what does that give us? This blank canvas approach basically provides us a big, wide playing field that we're not constrained by the contract. We can be very creative, and we are an energy agnostic, OEM agnostic organization. Therefore, a certain technology that's, let's say, not financially feasible today, but right around the corner, we can bring that to campus. A few years later, if certain technology becomes obsolete, another one becomes available, we can bring that to campus. Now, on the university side, that also provides, in my view, a big value compared to a conventional energy sales agreement, because while they transfer the risk and the responsibility of operations and execution of the infrastructure, they still retain control. Every single project that capital improvement project, is subject to our customers' approval. In other words, we have a blank canvas, but we don't have a blank check. So we have to propose attractive solutions to our customer for them to approve it before we can go ahead and design, finance, and execute it. I'll give an example. In one of our non-university customers, where we have a conventional energy sales solution, one of the commodities we sell the customer is steam. I think many people on this call today would agree that today heating hot water provides lower cost and lower carbon solution for heating compared to steam. So converting this customer from steam to heating hot water is rather tricky because A, heating hot water doesn't exist as a commodity for sale in the contract, and converting some of their heating oil from steam to hot water means we're going to be cannibalizing our steam sales. So it doesn't mean that this cannot be done, but it introduces a lot of contractual complexities, which then makes us and our customer work on these complexities. Whereas on the university campus, it's not even discussed. As long as the project delivers lower cost, higher reliability, lower carbon to our customer, universities, they look at the project, they say, yep, we like it, and then off we go. We start designing, the financing, and executing it. So in my view, that provides really a perfect balance, allowing the partner, the energy partner, flexibility, yet providing the customer, the university, control over what they want on their campus to happen or not. In terms of the financial structure, there's 3 payments. One is the fee for operations and maintenance. It's protected year on year over a cap. The second one is the upfront payment. When we win a concession, typically we give our customer an upfront payment, and then there's a fixed fee paid over 50 years back to us. But the really key one is the variable fee, which is any future capital investment that we execute on behalf of the customer. There's a mechanism that tells us how we get paid. And that mechanism is related to the service of designing and executing the project, and not necessarily related to the energy cost and price. So maybe finally, what have we achieved? So we signed with Ohio State in July 2017. So it's been 4 years plus a few months. Over the last 4 years, there's been over $600 million of investment into the campus energy infrastructure. The campus is going through a generational transformation. We've already achieved over 13% reduction in total energy use. We expect to exceed 25% by year 6. We are in the process of installing a new heating hot water network and reducing steam consumption on campus. We are implementing a hydrogen-ready combined heat and power plant. We have implemented a digital network that connects all the buildings, the generation sources, weather data and occupancy, and I can talk for another hour on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Serdar. It's a really interesting model that actually, you know, when we get into the questions, which we'll probably start doing now, I might start with you actually, and to see what your thoughts are in terms of how that model could potentially be replicated into other areas. I mean, is the university sector, you know, quite a unique client for you in that respect, or a unique, you know, segment of the market, or you know, is this model sort of replicable to other sectors as well?
Good question. So the university campus provides a perfect setting because typically there is a cluster of buildings next to each other, typically, especially research universities that have medical centers or athletic facilities. They use a lot of energy and they require high levels of reliability compared to, say, a small academic university. So any setting that has a cluster of buildings that require high energy reliability and has energy complexity, meaning if they need heating and cooling and electricity, ideally all three, that's a perfect setting. So some examples are hospital or medical complexes is a good area. Airports is a good example. Some business campuses, whether it's one large company and its own campus or a cluster of different companies in an area. All these are actually quite possible examples of where this university concession agreement can be replicated. One area that we do need help globally is in policy. In certain jurisdictions, it's very difficult to make a contract like that when the customers are not one entity. So whether it's state level or federal level, providing new laws to enable at the consumer end to come up with these energy efficiency and sharing ideas so that one entity can, if they have a good energy solution project, they can share it with the neighbor entity. Those would promote more and more arrangements like the one we have with universities.
Great, thank you. And we are going to get into questions and answers now. So if anyone has any questions that